Chief executive says time's still not right for national security legislation. In the U.S., Trump orders the flag at the White House to fly at half-staff again after a public outcry. And the U.S. and Mexico reach a trade deal.
Hello, good evening. The chief executive said again today that the time is not right for national security legislation to implement Article 23 of the Basic Law. As Caleb Long reports, Carrie Lam made the comment as Macau plans to set up a committee on national security.
Macau is a step ahead of Hong Kong. That's the chief executive's comment on the enclave's plan to set up a committee for national security purposes.
In the year 2009, Macau has already enacted a piece of legislation to protect national security. And that is, in our case, it is local legislation to put into effect Basic Law Article 23.
Chaired by Macau's chief executive, the committee will coordinate work on protecting national sovereignty, security, and development interests. It will also conduct studies and provide suggestions during policy-making processes. But as far as Hong Kong is concerned, Carrie Lam believes it's still not the right time for the SAR to commence national security legislation.
Our primary responsibility is to find the right opportunity and create the necessary conditions for us to put into effect the local legislation before we need a committee to ensure the legislation is being effectively enforced.
She also said there is some work in progress. Her office later clarified that the work mentioned by the CE is about whether to outlaw the pro-independence Hong Kong National Party and not about national security legislation. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the SAR security chief recapped what was discussed during a meeting with Vice Premier Han Zheng yesterday.
He has mentioned that there will be no tolerance of any attempt to threaten the sovereignty of the state in connection with any independence advocacy. Security Bureau should deal with it in accordance with the law.
John Lee said there was no discussion on Article 23 legislation with Beijing officials. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Hong Kong doctors are reporting what could be the world's first hepatitis E transmission through organ donation. 5 people became ill after receiving organs from the same donor. A hospital authority expressed concern over the findings and will establish an expert group to look into the matter. Sharon Tang has more.
It's the first report of hepatitis E virus, species A, transmission from one donor to multiple organ transplant recipients.
In February, a 29-year-old female patient died from stroke. Her organs were harvested. 2 patients received liver and lung transplants from the deceased donor at Queen Mary Hospital, but they later became infected with the hepatitis E virus. One of them subsequently died in August. However, doctors say the patient's death was unlikely related to the infection. Researchers later confirmed that 3 other organ recipients had developed abnormal liver functions, including a 6-year-old boy. Currently, donated organs are not screened for hepatitis E because the disease is seldom fatal and waiting for test results may delay certain procedures.
That provided whether we can get the result in a very short period of time. Because if the result just come back, it may take 1 to 2 days, then it may be impossible to our organ donation system.
Queen Mary Hospital has already reported the case to the Hospital Authority and the Centre for Health Protection and has been in contact with the affected patients to provide assistance and treatment. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
One of the city's well-known developers, Walter Kwok, remains in hospital after he collapsed last night. After falling ill at his Deep Water Bay home, the 67-year-old was taken to Rattanji Hospital's intensive care unit. He was later transferred to a private hospital. His younger brother, Raymond, who now heads on Hong Kai Properties, paid him a visit. A family spokesperson said the elder Kwok is being taken care of by multiple doctors, but there was no mention of why he felt unwell.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has announced an understanding with Mexico that could lead to an overhaul of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. As Alan Booknia reports, it puts pressure on Canada to agree to the new terms to remain part of the Three-Nation Pact.
A new name for NAFTA, as U.S. President Donald Trump renegotiated part of it.
So we're going to call it the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. We'll get rid of the name NAFTA. It has a bad connotation because the United States was hurt very badly by NAFTA for many years.
The details are sketchy, but much of the focus was on motor vehicles. The rules require at least 75% of car materials to come from North American countries, up from 62.5%, and that 40 to 45% of workers be paid $16 an hour or more. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto repeated his insistence that Canada be part of the talks in order to reach a trilateral deal in the revamp of NAFTA. He passed that on to Trump by speakerphone.
And of course, I am quite hopeful that now Canada will start discussing with the United States the sensitive bilateral issues.
I'll be calling the Prime Minister very soon, and we'll start negotiation. And if they'd like to negotiate fairly, we'll do that. I think with Canada, frankly, the easiest thing we can do is to tariff their cars coming in. It's a tremendous amount of money, and it's a very simple negotiation. It could end in one day, and we take in a lot of money the following day.
The stakes are high for all three countries. Trump and Republicans up for re-election in November want to ensure voters whose jobs depend on trade with Canada and Mexico that a deal is sealed. Justin Trudeau faces a national election expected by October 2019, and Peña Nieto wants to sign the agreement before he leaves office at the end of November. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
United Nations investigators have called for top military leaders in Myanmar to be prosecuted for genocide over the country's Rohingya crisis. It's the strongest condemnation yet since the brutal crackdown on a Muslim minority group a year ago. Peter Coveas with details.
UN investigators called for 6 senior military leaders in Myanmar to be prosecuted for genocide against Rohingya Muslims in Rakhine State. The 3-person panel concluded Myanmar's commander-in-chief, Min Aung Hlaing, and 5 other generals had to know of the atrocities being committed.
In Myanmar, there is a very clear chain of command, and there is no doubt in our minds whatsoever that what we saw happen in Rakhine as a whole would not have happened without it firstly being within the knowledge of the senior military leadership, and secondly under their effective control.
Last year, Myanmar government troops led a crackdown after attacks by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army on 30 police posts and a military base. The UN said the military action was grossly disproportionate to the actual threats. More than 700,000 Rohingya people fled the country over the clampdown. The majority ended up in neighboring Bangladesh. This refugee is happy the report was released and wants those responsible to be punished. This man wants justice, because without justice, people cannot return to Myanmar because they will still be killed. The report criticized many, including Myanmar's civil leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. They believe the Nobel Peace Prize winner didn't do enough to stop the crimes. Officials also pointed the finger at Facebook and claimed the social network's response to hate speech was slow and ineffective. Facebook has since responded by blocking numerous officials and organizations the UN claims committed or enabled serious human rights abuses. Peter Coveos, TVB News.
China and Greece have agreed to cooperate on developing the Belt and Road Initiative. Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Greek counterpart Nikos Kotzias signed a memorandum of understanding in Beijing. Greece became the first developed nation to ink such a deal. Wang reaffirmed China's aim to connect the Belt and Road Initiative with European investment. Kotzias is in Beijing on a 5-day visit. He said Greece will also look to cooperate with China on areas such as politics, the economy and culture. And still ahead. 5 injured in an airplane incident in Shenzhen. A new dengue infection linked to the Lion Rock Park. And video of Putin taking a hiking holiday in Siberia. Welcome back to TVB News. More than 150 passengers were taken on a detour as wind shear forced their plane to land in Shenzhen instead of Macau. 5 people were injured in the incident. Passengers were keen to get off the aircraft. They departed Beijing for Macau but found themselves in Shenzhen instead. Capital Airlines flight JD 5759 touched down in Shenzhen's Bao'an Airport around noon. The last-minute change was made as wind shear was experienced as the plane tried to land at Macau's airport. Wind shear can lead to the sudden gain or loss in an aircraft's altitude. These photos show its nose gear snapped, an engine damaged. Of 157 passengers and 9 cabin crew on board, 5 suffered minor injuries. Passengers were ferried to the enclave this afternoon.
It could be some mechanic maintenance issue, more likely. It could be due to the heavy landing. But the nose gear is the important part of the steering. Without that may be a possibility off the runway.
Still, the commercial pilot turned legislator said it was only reasonable to divert to Shenzhen as Macau International Airport has only one single runway.
Sources say there is one more case of locally contracted dengue fever. The patient is a 47-year-old woman who had been to Lion Rock Park. This would bring the total number of local dengue infections so far this year to 27.
A Chinese university professor accused of murdering his wife and second daughter told the police after his arrest that his daughter might have committed suicide using the carbon monoxide stored in a yoga ball. The High Court also heard today that the defendant had told the police he did not know how the yoga ball ended up in the trunk of the car where his wife and daughter were found dead. Caleb Long has the details.
Medical professor Ko Kim's son was back at the High Court this morning. The expert on anesthesia is charged with murdering his wife and second daughter on May 22, 2015. The two were found dead in a car. In the trunk of the vehicle was a yoga ball filled with carbon monoxide with its air plug removed. Lam Kam Chung, the police sergeant who arrested Ko in May 2016, told the court what Ko said during the questioning. Under caution, Ko said the carbon monoxide was intended for killing rats. He put the yoga ball at the place where the second daughter exercised and warned her of what was inside. The court heard the second daughter was the only person aware of the gas, and Ko was clueless about how the ball ended up in the trunk of the car. He suspected that the daughter had used the gas to commit suicide. The court was also shown a video of the police questioning Ko, which showed the defendant explaining why he thought this was a suicide. He said he might have given his second daughter too much pressure on schoolwork, or the daughter might have had a quarrel with her mother. He also explained why he never told the police about the yoga balls, although he knew it was carbon monoxide that had caused the deaths. Ko said he was worried about the consequences, such as causing trouble to his colleagues or no one will take care of his children. Caleb Bloom, TVB News.
4 people have been arrested in connection with an assault case on Sunday. The victim was wounded by someone armed with a knife while queuing for tickets to Canto pop star Andy Lau's concert. People were still camping outside a ticket booth this morning, though not for long, as officers rounded up 4 men aged 26 to 30. They allegedly have triad backgrounds and have tried to jump the queue before attacking one of those waiting in the line.
Phil Ko Wong earlier lost his job as the MTR Corporation's projects director over the Hong Kong station scandal. Weeks later, he also decided to quit the presidency of the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers. Wang will step down officially this Saturday on September 1st. In an email to members, the engineer explained his decision is to keep the council of the professional body united and harmonious. And that's despite a vote of confidence from over 60% of council members. They want him to remain as president, a role Philco Wong has held since late June. Back locally, sources say a University of Hong Kong associate professor was arrested on suspicion of killing his wife. According to the sources, Cheung Kei-chung reported to the police a week ago that his wife was missing. Following an investigation, the police found the woman's body inside Cheung's office. Cheung is a member of the HKU Council. The Kremlin has released video of President Vladimir Putin taking a hiking holiday in southern Siberia. The Russian leader returned to one of his favorite holiday spots, the far-flung wilderness of the remote Tuva region. He spent last weekend in the mountains with his defense minister and the head of Russia's main intelligence agency, the FSB. Putin took the break on his way to a coal mining hub in Siberia to meet with top managers of energy companies. The video shows the 65-year-old hiking, examining plants and riding in a boat. Putin's vacations are well covered by the Kremlin. One summer, he was shown galloping on a horse, bare-chested, across a mountain creek. And that's it.